Hello, everyone, and warm greetings. Welcome to today's event, Local Democracy in Action, Stories from the Field, hosted by the Center for International Private Enterprise, or CIPE, and Stanford University's Center for Democracy Development and the Rule of Law, or CDDRL. My name is Adam Sachs, a program officer at CIPE, and it is my great pleasure to moderate today's event, which features a video from Francis Fukuyama and presentations showcasing the innovative work conducted by the Local Democracy in Action grantees. Now, before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. Please use the Q&A function and we will respond during either of the two Q&A discussion breaks. Please note that this event is being recorded and streamed on Facebook Live. Today, we are pleased to welcome presentations from Nini Turkia, the project coordinator at the Economic Policy Research Center in Georgia, Getachew Teklemariam, Ali Taha, a researcher at the Lebanese Center for Policy Studies, Ruslan Dirbakov, founder of the Eurasian Digital Foundation, Irina Nemrovich, executive director and co-founder of the Ukrainian Healthcare Center, and Bikin Gamir, a communications and product manager and civic tech specialist at Accountability Lab based in Nepal. But first, we will hear some opening remarks from Francis Fukuyama, the Olivier Nomelini Senior Fellow at the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies and the director of the Ford Dorsey Masters in International Policy. While Francis Fukuyama is unable to join us live today, we are honored to share with you his opening remarks via video. Now, without further ado, let us begin.
Hi, my name is Frank Fukuyama. I'm a senior fellow at the Center on Democracy Development and the Rule of Law. And I'd like to thank all of you for participating in the collaboration grants under the Leadership Network for Change. LNC is a combination of all of the leadership programs at CDDRL, the Draper Hill Summer Fellows Program, the Leadership Academy for Development, and the Ukrainian Emerging Leaders Program. We're hoping to build a network of agents of change, people that want to make the world better. And the collaboration grants have been an important element in allowing members of the network that participated in these different CDDRL programs to work together. So thanks for the work that you've done. I hope that it leads to ongoing relationships and further efforts to bring about positive change in the world in the interest of democracy, development, and rule of law. Thanks very much.
Wonderful. It's so great to hear from Francis Fukuyama, and it's truly right. It's really about the collaboration and building those sorts of relationships for positive change. And that is just what the Local Democracy in Action grants are seeking to do. It is just the latest in a series of collaborations with CIPE and CDDRL, from distrust in democratic institutions, shrinking civic spaces, and unaddressed solutions to digital authoritarianism, among other challenges. The world is facing some complex challenges. That is why I am pleased that we have been able to leverage CIPE's partner network and CDDRL's Leadership Network for Change to develop new and innovative approaches that promote shared democratic values. I am excited to hear from our speakers today and learn how they were able to think globally and act locally. So let's begin our global tour in Georgia, where we have Nini Turkia from the Economic Policy Research Center, or EPRC, to share their work on strengthening public understanding of important issues facing Georgian society. Nini, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to have an opportunity to join you on this very interesting event and share our organization's experience. As Adam already mentioned, my name is Nini, and I'm project coordinator at the Economic Policy Research Center, a leading economic think and do tank in Georgia, which aims to foster sustainable economic development in Georgia through the lens of security and democracy dimensions, good governance, and Euro-Atlantic integration, firmly Believing in the importance of democratic values, our organization aims to actively contribute to strengthening the Georgian democracy. However, in the contemporary world, democracy faces significant challenges, especially after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which has shaken the whole world. But the challenges which democratic world faces today were not sudden. Russia's constantly growing aggression and influence in the region, the rise of populism, the weakening of the mainstream political discourse, and the fusion of the traditional political ideologies have been trending for several years now. Due to rising uncertainty and confusion in modern informational ecosystem, there is now more room for disinformation and conspiracy theories, which are contributing to increasing the polarization in the society. And this trend is well reflected on Georgian society as well. With this regard, the Economic Policy Research Center believes that to overcome these challenges, we need to work closely with the society and provide them with a medium which would serve as an unbiased, reliable and apolitical source of information, and provide them with the knowledge which will be easily understandable and perceivable. Together with the Radio Liberty, or as we call them in Georgia, Radio Tavtspleba, we decided to create podcast series called The World Upside Down. Why we decided to create podcast series? The reason behind this is that we believe podcast to be the most time-efficient way to communicate with the public and provide them with the personal, convenient, and easily consumable information. If we can move to the next slide. Originally, we thought that this podcast would cover general topics about democracy and technology, economic development, and how this all correlates in sustainable economic and democratic development of the country. However, the ongoing events in Ukraine made us to change our perspective a little bit and shift our focus mainly on the ongoing events in Ukraine and discuss the democratic security and economic development in light of these tragic events. Thus, we decided to devote our episodes to the ongoing events in Ukraine and how this would affect not only Georgia, but our region, and what consequences would we face. As you can see in the slides, it's the names of our podcast episodes, and we were always trying to keep the ongoing events in Ukraine in mind while discussing the future of Georgia, the democratic development in Georgia, etc. Our podcasts featured local experts as well as experts from the West. If we can show the slides, it's like third and fourth. After that, please. Yes. We also invited ambassadors and Stanford professors who were participating in our podcast series. In total, we created 10 episodes and disseminated this on various platforms like Spotify, Apple. Also, we published it on our Facebook pages as well as on Radio Liberty's web page devoted to the podcast. If we can show the last slide. In total, our podcast generated more than 30,000 views. Yes, we created 3 face-to-face and online lectures, which resonated in the society very positively. We got very positive feedback, and we think that we more or less achieved our goal, and the number of listeners is constantly increasing because I think that the topics we covered are not only for one-time use, and it will resonate in the society in the future as well. Thank you for the attention.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nini. And it's just fantastic to hear the expansive list of topics and the huge public interest in the podcasts and lectures as well. I particularly liked how you were able to adapt your topics and demand to the changing dynamics developing in Georgia and elsewhere in the region. And I have a feeling that'll be a common theme throughout many of the projects and presentations we hear today. We will certainly dive in deeper during the Q&A. But first, we have two more partners to hear from. Next, we'll go over to Ethiopia, where Getachew Teklemariam will share how their research on South Korea, Tunisia, and Estonia's e-procurement or e-governance can promote greater public participation and accountability in Ethiopia. Getachew, over to you. Getachew, I believe you might be muted. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here and to be speaking about our projects. Our project is called Ensuring Public Accountability Through E-Government in Ethiopia. So we initiated the project from an understanding that there is huge problem of accountability, particularly in local governments in Ethiopia, but also at all levels of government. There seems to be significant deficit when it comes to like public accountability and transparency, and we saw that in areas where there have been introduction of the digital solutions, particularly in areas like business registration, we saw that there has been improvements in terms of accountability and responsiveness of government, and we really wanted to learn how e-government could actually improve accountability at local level and ensure public participation in the decision-making processes, and wanted to learn from countries that have managed to realize an effective digitalization of public services and integrates public accountability and participation in their decision process. So we chose 3 benchmarking countries, basically Estonia, South Korea, and Tunisia. The two countries, Estonia and South Korea, are mature democracies that have really established an established electoral democracy as well as integrated public services, while Tunisia, following the Arab Spring, is passing through its own time of reconfiguring its public service as well as overall democratic superstructure. So we really wanted to learn both from mature democracies as well as from an aspiring democracy that's trying to put together the systems in place. So we delve into the exploration of the paths through which they have these 3 countries have implemented digitalization in their public system and integrated accountability in their process. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we could not travel to these countries. So our exploration needs to actually depend on first-hand information from people who have been working on the issues through, meeting them and having discussions virtually, but also diving deep into the research that are available that show the paths that the countries have followed in terms of adopting digitization in public services. So we have kind of identified 4 areas where there seems to be similarity between these 3 countries in terms of establishing the right path for public accountability in their public services. And this relates to one is establishing the right infrastructure and having the right infrastructure backbone for the system to operate on. The second one is in terms of human capital. They have really invested so much in terms of building their human capital. Their human capital, people directly involved in the design and development of the systems, and also the wider community in terms of really increasing the awareness of the overall public in terms of making use of digitization, both to get the services as well as account governments, both local as well as higher level governments. And the third one is putting in place the right institutions, the right policies, legislative instruments, and also the right supporting agencies, both public agencies as well as private agencies, and some like associations that could really steer the overall process of adoption, both within the government as well as in the wider ecosystem. And the fourth one that we have identified is market development. There has been so much of investment in terms of developing business cases, incentivizing the different segments of the market and the public sector to really shift from a traditional way of working to a more digitized, transparent, and accountable public system and public service provision. So we have learned that, and we have really seen where the gaps are for Ethiopia. Ethiopia seems to have actually established that vision in terms of approach. The overall, I mean, the 3 countries we have explored have started from developing that vision. And it seems that Ethiopia is at that stage of articulating the vision in terms of digitizing public services. But there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of the other 3 areas of developing an integrated public service system. And after learning that, we have started engaging with public agencies to see how this could actually be taken up in Ethiopia, and lessons learned from these 3 countries could actually be integrated in the overall process. And we are in the final stage of arranging a workshop that's going to be involving all stakeholders, and we'll be presenting the lessons that we have learned from these 3 countries. And through an ICT association, we'll continue to be lobbying and advocating for an uptake of digitization in the public service, particularly in local governments, and for more transparency and accountability in public services. So we hope that Ethiopia will be learning from these countries, and we hope to continue to advocate for an open internet, protected data for citizens, but as well as responsive public services at local level, wherein citizens do have a stake in the decision-making process. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Getachew. And that's just fantastic to hear how the experiences in other countries and even regions are helping to inform the development of e-procurement platforms in Ethiopia. And you're right. I mean, open internet, responsive services, all very important in supporting democracy really in the digital age. Before we go on to our next presentation, I'd like to pose a reminder. We will have a Q&A session to discuss the first 3 projects. So please use the Q&A function and pose the questions that you wish. We'll be getting to them shortly, right after we hear from Ali, where in Lebanon, at the Lebanese Center for Policy Studies, he will be sharing the recommendations they've developed for his country's e-procurement system. So Ali, over to you.
Thank you, Adam. Allow me to start by thanking the CIPE team who have worked on this event. I'm going to start by introducing myself and the organization that I work with. So my name is Ali Taha. I'm a researcher at the Lebanese Center for Policy Studies. Our project focuses, next slide, please. So our project focuses on e-procurement as a tool for a more transparent and efficient public procurement process at the local level. I'm not going to go through much of the theoretical aspect of that topic because of time limitations. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction into the background context, basically. So Lebanon has passed last year the new public procurement law, which is intended to improve the national public procurement system. This law is an essential reform on the level of governance. It entails the establishment of an e-procurement platform, and this is a key element contributing to the success of this particular reform. And this is why we decided to focus our project on that, that element. Next slide, please. So we started the project with a wide scope. We started with an article authored by Lamia Mbayed and Basma Abdel Khaliq, both of whom have worked on the drafting of the law. And and it was a widely disseminated article. Then we followed with a webinar that kind of narrows down the focus of the project more into the subject of digitizing the procurement process, as well as complementary laws such as the right to access information law. So then we started with the first roundtable that was in March, and it was basically to investigate the state of the e-procurement platform. This event hosted a number of key government stakeholders, as well as international organizations such as the OECD, the World Bank, and the OCP, as well as other civil society organizations. We discussed many topics, including implementation modalities of the platform, standards for open procurement data, governance of e-procurement systems and role of various stakeholders, and system sustainability. So also, we followed up with a number of one-on-one interviews with key government stakeholders. And after those two events, we realized that there's an aspect of the implementation of the law that is completely absent from the literature as well as from public debate. And that is the implementation of the law on the local level, and particularly the ability of municipalities to adopt the e-procurement platform, basically. So this inspired our second roundtable, which was about the readiness of municipalities to transition to e-procurement. It also hosted a number of key government, international, and civil society stakeholders. Next slide, please. So some of the issues discussed were government-sponsored capacity building initiatives, assessment of the preparedness of municipalities to adopt e-procurement, the role of Lebanon's international partners and of civil society actors to support municipalities in their transition to e-procurement. And eventually we generated a set of recommendations that would eventually, in addition to recommendations that were also produced during the first roundtable, would feed into the final product of this project, which is a policy brief. So just to give also some background information about this, the topic of the policy brief. In Lebanon, we have around 1,030 municipalities spread unevenly across 26 districts, the majority of which are small ones with less than 4,000 inhabitants. And these are in charge of setting and balancing the budget, as well as collecting fees and taxes, managing properties, and establishing or maintaining infrastructure and public utilities. So one of the reasons that supported our rationale was the fact that considering the economic meltdown and its impact on public administration here in Lebanon, local communities are now more reliant on the services provided by their local municipalities. So this only increased the need for a robust procurement regime on the local level. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges that we were able to identify, first and foremost, were the fiscal constraints. Again, considering the economic meltdown, so municipalities in Lebanon have two sources of revenues. One, it's the taxes and fees that they collect, and these have been reduced significantly because of the devaluation of the currency. And then because of the same reason, the second source, which is the transfers from the central government, these were inconsistent because the government was not able to always fulfill its financial commitments towards those institutions. And then we have the administrative and technical capacities. As I've mentioned, most of municipalities in Lebanon are small, thus their staff is often not capable of really supporting the new requirements that are brought about by the law. And so then we have the state of the ICT infrastructure, which is also now facing a lot of challenges considering the energy crisis. Internet services in Lebanon are now notoriously bad. So this is also a major challenge. And then we have the political economy of public procurement at the local level. Mainly, a lot of businesses locally belong to the informal economy, and so they are not registered, and thus they cannot take part in any bids, okay? So these were some of the main challenges that we were able to identify. As to the recommendations that we were able to generate and collect throughout those different events and exercises, first, the first recommendations have to do with the technicalities of the platform. First thing, it is important to have an e-procurement system that is modular, flexible, scalable, and secure. Second, and this is a really important point, and that is to prioritize public e-procurement and other government platforms relevant to the public procurement process as key areas for the application programming interfaces deployment. And then investing into the development of a government content management system that is easy to use for government employees. To the next slide, please. So then we have recommendations relevant to practicalities of implementation. There's the need to improve the safety and reliability of the ICT infrastructure, and this would project trust, especially considering that the private sector is going to be sharing data on that platform. Improving internet services, especially in rural areas. And then we have stakeholders' capacity building activities. Next slide, please. So we also have recommendations pertaining to the political economy context at the local level. And this is to provide sufficient equipment for the Review and Complaints Authority. And this is a body in charge of complaints that allows potential bidders and active suppliers to access fair, transparent, and speedy processes to file complaints in the pre-contractual stage. And this is really important to project, to basically, project trust in the process for the private sector to really adopt that new law. And then we have institutional leadership, and this is a major thing in Lebanon because so many times there's just a lack of
and it looks like one issue that Ali had mentioned in Lebanon is the energy crisis.
I'm not sure. Oh. So I'm not sure if you could. Yeah. So
yes,
the power. Yeah.
We can hear you, Ali. You're back.
Yeah, exactly. So our worst fears have realized. Yeah, basically in Lebanon, this is one of the issues as well, which is basically many power cuts throughout the day, okay? And I'm one of the lucky ones who have a private generator. So we have institutional leadership to encourage collaboration between governments private sector, civil society, media, academia, and others to promote the utilization of open data. This would surely improve monitoring, oversight, and feedback, and eventually improves trust in the system and among stakeholders. We have also stakeholders engagement activities. And finally, with a general recommendation, the next slide. So critical success factors is a useful quantitative assessment of information systems. Because what it does, it locates areas or functions where events and actions must occur to ensure successful performance. So periodic CSFs assessments are therefore essential for e-procurement's broad deployment at the municipal level, and it is instrumental in preventing its demise with time, because also this is a major problem in Lebanon, that sometimes laws are enforced and implemented for a short period of time, then institutions just decide to, leave those behind and continue working as before and operating as before. So this is mainly it. Thank you. Thanks a lot for listening, and I am ready to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. And I'm glad that we were able to get around that power outage as well. And such a fascinating project. And I'm so glad that we're able to talk a little bit more about it. Before we do, though, we do have our first question coming in from Facebook, and this is actually addressed over to Nini. And it's really looking at the change of perception from some of the work that EPRC has conducted with podcasts and lectures. How did these podcasts and lectures change the perception of the audience, and were you able to track that at all?
Thank you for this great question. Actually, it's very interesting. Unfortunately, we were not able to track the change because we mainly communicated with the audience through social media outlets. However, I think that, so there are bubbles which consist of people who share the same values, and they have tools to check information, and it's really easy to spread like unbiased and apolitical and neutral information and this podcast series among our bubbles because it's well perceived. However, if we reach people outside of our bubble, we are getting negative comments and negative feedback because they have different values and they are affected by the disinformation and the conspiracy theories. We had this kind of cases, and based on our empirical observations and the number of comments, I think that we reached people outside of our bubble. And one of the strategies while using our advertisement campaigns was to reach people who were most affected by and influenced by disinformation. And we were selecting groups on Facebook, and these target groups consisted of this type of people. So based on the comments, we think that we made our voices heard. And so, yes, I don't know if this answers.
Yeah. Yes, I believe it does. And I mean, that's a particularly important part, is trying to figure out how to reach outside of that bubble and reach those who do not normally interact with you and getting that information across. So that was great to share. Our next question is geared towards Getachew in Ethiopia. What does a more digitally integrated local government look like? As in, what are examples of types of systems are hoping to be set up as a result of this research? Getachew, might you be able to respond to that?
Yes. So basically, by integrating having an integrated e-government at local level involves different aspects. One is in terms of infrastructure, how infrastructure is installed, how infrastructure is shared, both hard as well as soft infrastructure. How is that shared amongst the different tiers of government and the different departments at the local level? So, I mean, as Ethiopia is a federated country, So accountability has two lines. One is there is an administrative reference that all local governments would actually be referring to the higher local government, the higher government tier. And basically there is communication and sharing of information between these different levels of government. On the other hand, there are sectoral accountabilities, and each department at the local level would actually be also communicating directly with the sectors at different levels. So in terms of sharing of information, in terms of having the right infrastructure in place at local level, it all involves integrating these two lines of government references and really have a functional framework of sharing information and that avoids also the duplication of service provision and also sometimes registry of citizens. If one is a trader, for example, he or she would have to go register for business license in a different department. The tax department is a different structure, and the administrative structure that requires that provides some services like identity cards is a different structure. There is no sharing of infrastructure as well as databases, and there is a repetition in terms of requirement for citizens. So basically, these whole things need to actually be integrated, not only at infrastructure level, but also the business cases need to also integrate amongst themselves for integration of services. If a citizen is registered just at one of the places, as the case is in our benchmarking countries, citizens would actually be registered at one portal, and that information would actually be shared amongst the different service providers. So those sorts of frameworks have to actually be put in place. The other thing is the feedback loop. If the feedback loop is very important, because that's where citizens would actually be directly engaging in the decision-making process and exercising their democratic rights of both accounting the system as well as being part of the decision-making process. So the feedback loop amongst all these different sections has to also really be integrated and somehow has to be eased for citizens. That's particularly how it's implemented in South Korea. That's how it's implemented in Estonia. It's very easy to actually provide feedback on different government services, and the system really allows for sharing of those feedback amongst the different service providers if that business case in one way or another relates to their service provision. So that's basically what an integrated local government e-government has to look like in Ethiopia. Currently, there are a lot of missing elements that need to actually be put in place. That's what we have learned.
I believe we may have lost him due to internet connection, which is very relevant.
And that's
yes, I believe we've lost him, and we're seeing these issues all across, and that's part of the work that we do, anyways. But that's been great to hear about from Getachew and how there's definitely that need to integrate and support for the e-procurement development. I will pivot over to a next question before we shift over to the final three presentations. And this is just to any of the presenters. Was there anything that surprised you during your project? Perhaps something that went differently from how you had imagined or planned? Sure. Nini, I saw that you had.
I think Ali had raised his hand, so maybe he can share, because my answer is obvious, because sure. Yeah. Okay.
Ali, please go ahead.
Sure thing. So we started this project with let's say a vision to compare between the implementation of the reforming of the procurement process and the procurement system between Lebanon and Ukraine, and maybe draw some lessons from the Prozoro experience in Ukraine. But then many things happened, and one of them was the war in Ukraine, and that made contact with some of the people that we were partnering with pretty difficult. So that's one thing. And also another thing was our realization that the current economic crisis that Lebanon is going through makes comparability really hard, because there are really so many challenges that are facing both the public and the private sectors here in Lebanon that make comparison not really valid and solid. So this made us change basically the direction and the outline of the project and the conceptualization of the project. And it's always the case in these projects, as well as in these countries, that research has to be flexible and adaptive to whatever insights that might appear in the process. So that's my answer, basically. Thank you.
Thank you. And definitely lessons learned. I mean, as much as you do want to compare and kind of see what those best practices are, they have to apply to that local context. Getachew, we're talking about anything that surprised you during your project. If you don't, just seeing if you have any response to that, or Nini, if there's anything else for you to add as well.
Yeah, so I mean, what was surprising for us was of course, I mean, the challenge we faced at the time was actually our inability to travel and meet in person all the stakeholders that were part of the digital journey of our benchmarking countries. But the exploration that we have done, even if we were not able to really do the in-person travel and meetings that we planned, was actually how much of an information that is available in terms of understanding the paths that these countries have actually followed. And surprisingly enough, in our engagement with policymakers at local level, they didn't have an understanding of the state of things in countries like Estonia, where pretty much almost all of government services have gone digital, and some of the policymakers were actually thinking that we were talking about an ideal case, which is not an ideal case. I mean, it has happened years ago actually, but the other thing is there is less research done on the paths of these countries and in terms of filtering out the lessons that other least developed countries like Ethiopia could actually learn from these paths in terms of really adopting the digitization, particularly the application of digitization and its impact on ensuring accountability at local level is a less researched topic. That's particularly how I mean, well, what we found and what surprised us. We kind of tried to make use of whatever limited amount of research that we could find, and try to talk to policymakers from these different countries. But there seems to be less attention given by researchers on the role of digitization and digitization of public services for the development of democracy at local level.
Wonderful, thank you. And then that's great that we're identifying those gaps. For I'm sure we could have a long discussion more on all of these surprises, but we do need to move forward and hear from our other presenters and LDAG partners. And so I will pass the floor over to Sasha Jason from CDDRL to facilitate the remaining 3 presentations. Sasha, over to you.
So I'm very happy to introduce our next 3 presentations from Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and Nepal in that order. So I'll turn to Ruslan Dayarbekov, who worked on the project Data Protection Regulation Upgrades with his partner from Georgia, Nino Ganidze. So Ruslan, if you would speak to your
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Ruslan Dayarbekov. Firstly, let me express my deep appreciation for this unique opportunity to share our project achievements, and let me introduce myself. I founded the Eurasian Digital Foundation, a platform that unifies the leading NGOs from Eurasian region and Central Asia to build and support network of digital rights leaders across Eurasia. And we are strongly advocating for digital rights protection in Kazakhstan, especially for data protection and privacy. And we achieving an objective by ensuring that Eurasian civil society voices are reflected in the global debate about the future of the internet, the information society, and digital media. And so let's come back to the project. Our project called as Data Protection Regulations Upgrades in Kazakhstan. The overall objective of our project is to create an efficient regulatory framework with appropriate use of data, storage, control, and responsibility by authorities with data collection. And our specific objective is, so we conducted 2 webinars for a group of policymakers and think tanks from Kazakhstan, representing members of digital rights expert group, to offer an opportunity to learn and share best practices of operation from Georgia in raising data protection standards on both legislative and practical level. So next slide, please. An open webinar of Georgian experts. So it was conducted, and the main purpose of this webinar was to help participants, civil society representatives, better understand how the data protection works in Georgia. So, and also we were trying to achieve objective to help participants gain better understanding of responsibilities of public bodies of Georgia in terms of data protections. Next slide, please. And finally, we also conducted the special session where we launched this project, by the way. Next slide, please. It was called Eurasian Data Protection Congress. So it was our pleasure to share our project there. And just briefly, let me talk a little bit about the situation in Kazakhstan regarding the data protection and privacy issues. And you know, I am deeply concerned about the ability of private IT companies to have broad access to our personal data. The ability of Kazakhstan government to listen our individuals' conversation and to give orders for network shutdowns. And in the context of recent violence in January in Almaty, city in Kazakhstan, the role of IT services and products in conflict has been increased. And unfortunately, I'm worried that the Kazakh authorities will continue to take any legislative steps to restrict promotion of the free information flow in the republic. And you know, I'm inspired by our project, because our initiative to form corporate accountability for human rights in the digital age, not only from civil society, but also focused to the government. So, and of course, I'm happy that Georgian data protection expertise in promoting advanced democratic values has been endorsed in Kazakhstan. So that's it. If you have any questions, please ask me. Thank you very much for watching me.
Thank you, Ruslan, for that. And I just want to note, you know, Ruslan's dedication to this project, even in light of the events that were happening in Kazakhstan at the beginning of 2022. We were really impressed by your dedication and commitment, even, you know, during the protests and when you were worrying about your own safety. So, you know, now to turn to another project that has had similar limitations in terms of the geopolitical situation. We turn to Ukraine now with Irina Nemirovich, who is representing the project Enhancing the Quality of Decisions and Creating Local Coalitions Around Key Reforms. So Irina, if you could speak to your project.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm privileged to get to you from my home, from my flat today in Kiev. Luckily, it is still in place, even though 3 missiles landed only 500 meters from my house, but it is still here and I can be with you today. So I will talk not about our project, because as you can understand, a lot has changed, but a bit about how we as an organization dealt with this crisis and how similar organizations can maybe react and can get some lessons learned from our experience. Next slide, please. So our organization is a Ukrainian Healthcare Center. It's a think tank. It was created just in the beginning of 2021. So we were like a startup, very young think tank. Next, please. Our main areas of focus were about the analytics in the field of healthcare, educational services, and consulting. Most of our team previously worked in the government, in different agencies, ministries, and so on and so forth. And back in 2016, 2019, we have implemented a huge healthcare reform in Ukraine. So after we left the government, we continued to work as a think tank. We had, as you can see, just in 1 year, we finished more than 30 projects. We had 16 people in the team, and we were quite a great developing team. One of the projects we had was supported by the grant that you also received. And with this grant, we were trying to create a local coalition in the city of Rivne in the west of Ukraine and help them, different political parties and local government, to work together to implement healthcare reform in their city. Everything was going great. We performed an audit. We shown them the report. They were really excited. And for the 25th of February, we planned a 3-day strategic session where we had to work together with the mayor, deputy mayors, different political parties, different local policy and like just local servants to see what we can together create. Unfortunately, as you might know, next slide, please, on 24th of February, Russia invaded Ukraine again. It was a full-scale invasion and it changed everything just like that. It took us quite some time to ensure safety of our team and security. Some people from our team, they stayed in Kiev, but mostly we have relocated to the West. As we are like a startup organization, we couldn't afford like to pay for relocation, and all we could do is just ensure like previous preparations, that everyone had planned, everyone was prepared, they knew where they will go. And so for the first months, we tried to stay alive, let's say. Next, please. Our team mostly consists of women. 90% of our personnel are women, but almost none of them left the country. Only one, our colleague, who was pregnant. All others stayed in Ukraine, but we had to rearrange our life. We had to make like a lot of rearrangements, and we wanted to stay professional. Next slide, please. And me as an executive director and the co-founders of our organization, like the main task for us was to ensure financial sustainability of organization, that we continue to pay all the salaries to our team, and that we maintain good relations with our international partners, with our donors. It was pretty hard because at that point of time, we had not only professional challenges as you might have when you have financial crisis or things like that, but we had a lot of personal crises. Like, for example, I found out after the months of war that I'm pregnant. At that point of time, most of my family, they still stayed near Kiev in Bucha. You can Google Bucha massacre. This was one of the most violent moments of the war. Because more than 1,500 civilians were brutally killed there. And my father, my uncle, my brother, they joined the armed forces, and they were trying to fight on the territorial defense soldiers. So it was all just going crazy. Nevertheless, we wanted to stay professional. Next, please. So we were all scattered all around the country. And we couldn't make, like a strategic session or get together in a big office and create some kind of long-term plan, how we're going to react, what we're going to do. Next, please. So we just sit together with 5 co-founders, and we prepared like a super brief SWOT analysis of our organizations. We tried to look for some strengths and weaknesses, try to balance and try to look for any opportunities, any ideas we can use to build on them and to sustain our operations and to keep paying to our team. And next, please, what we got. At first, our first response to the crisis, we acted more as a citizens. Like, we started to volunteer, to look like where to buy medicines, where to buy some protective helmets and bulletproof vests and things like that. As the Russian troops were making more and more war crimes and committing atrocities in different cities, we started to document all the attacks that Russian armed forces performed on the healthcare facilities in Ukraine, because healthcare facilities are supported, they are protected by the Geneva Convention, and they cannot be a war target. Nevertheless, they were a war target. So we were trying, as we had like previously a huge network of contacts all around the country, we started to get in touch with people and to document these attacks. After we started sharing this with media, with different international organizations, mostly NGOs, we started receiving a lot of attention from the media, both Ukrainian media and international media. And in the past months, next please, we have given, this is, you can see like how the hospitals looked before and after the Russians came to Ukraine. Next, please. So in just first few months, we have given a lot of interviews and comments, and we have made like partnership with different investigating teams like the Washington Post, the New York Times, Deutsche Welle, and many, many, many others. And we help them to tell the story, to show what Russians are doing in Ukraine. This thing grew bigger, and we now have like 10 different analytical reports with various international organizations, and we are preparing together with them a few cases on particular attacks that can be taken further to the international court when it will be decided to which international court this might go. The other stream of our work was trying to exclude, like we had an advocacy campaign trying to exclude Russian Federation from different healthcare organizations, starting from the WHO, different professional healthcare organizations, and so on and so far, because you cannot be in the WHO and like, I don't know if you know, in Moscow, they have a huge regional office. They still have it in Moscow, and at the same time, kill people in the nearby country. So we had this advocacy campaign, and we managed to achieve some good results at the World Health Assembly, at the regional events in the World Health Organization in Europe. They did some investigations themselves, and we hope that they will give reports and that they will remove this European office from Moscow. Next, please. After all this media activity, we had a lot of inquiries from different international events to speak there. We worked with number of security panels, healthcare conferences. We had some events together with the Atlantic Council and so on and so far, trying to tell what is happening in Ukraine, because Russia is super good in propaganda. Russia is very good in reaching out. And so we're trying to be the voice of Ukraine in this field of healthcare and just reach out anywhere we can and tell what's happening in Ukraine. Next, please. As I told you in the beginning, we were not only the, let's say, analytical organization, but as well, we did some consulting and we did some educational activities and some policy work. So we also launched a number of events for Ukrainian healthcare facilities, for the managers of healthcare facilities, trying to help them to network a bit and to talk on their, like, how they're managing, how they're working under the occupation, how they're ensuring the stock of medicines for their facilities. So different aspects of managing the healthcare facilities. We had some lectures, we had some panels, and they were really successful. We had like more than 500 participants on each event in the country where you have war. So this is something really wanted by the community, and we gave this product to them. Next, please. The other thing we did, we continue our work on the policy level. But we switched our focus a bit from the development and strategic projects more to the emergency relief and more to the national policies that would be needed when the war ends, when we win. So we're talking about the rehabilitation system in Ukraine, about the mental health, about the provision of the medical services in times of war. So we're working both with the local level and national level, trying to be their brains, trying to help them find some solutions on how they can work now and what should be done later. And also we are working together with some international partners on the recovery projects, because we have to be ready for it, not when the war ends, when we win, but we need to have this plan in place now. So we're working on this place in field of healthcare. I guess this is the last slide of my presentation. I'm happy that all of us are safe and that we can still do our work. And if any of you would like to maybe talk more about our experience, or if you have any events and would be interesting to invite us, we're always happy to join.
Thank you so much, Irina. You know, I appreciate your dedication to this project, especially in the face of such personal and national adversity that you were facing. and your ability also to pivot and adapt it to the situation. Finally, I'm very pleased to turn to our Nepalese participant in this program or in this project. So Beacon Gamire will be presenting on the project Strengthening Technology-Driven Democracy through Robust and Digitally Secured Civic Space. And I'd like to remind everyone also that we will be able to turn to questions after this presentation. So if you have any, please, in mind or put them in the chat box. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sasa. It's great to be here today and present our work. Once again, I'm from Accountability Lab, and we work towards making governance work for people by supporting active citizens, responsible leaders, and accountable institutions. So you can see that democracy is a really important topic for us as well. And one of our approaches is to equip reformers within and outside the government with the knowledge, tools, skills that they need to make a positive change in communities. So our project, which is strengthening tech-driven democracy through robust and robust and digitally secured civic space in Nepal, does exactly that. And I think we were at the right time as well, because technology was booming in Nepal. I know we were late, but it did happen after COVID. So I think it was a perfect time for us to work on this as well. So let's move on to the next slide. So talking about the context, the biggest problem we saw was that the online space is really unsafe. I mean, as many as 58 government websites were hacked in 2017, and it hasn't stopped since. And the civic space isn't much safe either, because with our discussions with CSOs and our regular dialogues, revealed that they constantly have to deal with digital security breaches. Similarly, there's a lot of oppression on civil society and media and the general public from the government as well. The Nepali government have been trying to regulate different kinds of regulate the digital space through different laws and regulations over the past few years. Like in 2019, they tried to pass the IT regulation bill, which proposed social media operation directive to regulate social media behaviors of citizens, and special services bill, which allows intelligence agencies to intercept conversations between suspects with electronic mediums, using electronic mediums, championing the constitutionally guaranteed right to privacy as well. So our solution to all of this was building a comprehensive toolkit to capacitate CSOs with knowledge and tools related to digital security, which we believe are essential to strengthen tech-driven democracy in Nepal. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so as you can see, we have a beautiful picture for our approach. Our approach for the work was kind of multi-layered, with a number of concurrent interventions that covered a broad area of individuals and groups that reinforce one another over time. We did begin with a lot of desk research, and we conducted a survey with over 100 CSOs across Nepal. Well, provided that we selected the CSOs based on how much capacity they have to secure themselves digitally as well. And then we moved on to conducting different kinds of workshops to solve identified problems and to provide practical recommendations, and a series of CSOs engagement efforts to sift norms, build unlikely networks, and support the skills needed for CSOs to initiate a collective movement towards greater safety, accountability, and freedom. And as you can see in the presentation as well, all three of these aspects of our approach was mutually reinforcing as well. We did start with building a foundation, but after that we moved on to talking with different kinds of CSOs, and then we implemented all of the practical recommendations. But after that, it revealed more gaps in our own knowledge, and then we continued with our research, our dialogues again, our engagements again, and then we implemented them again. And the best part is that the three wheels in the diagram are still moving. We're still conducting research, we're still implementing all of the ideas, we're still engaging with these CSOs regularly to find better solutions to make the civic space more digitally safe in Nepal. And our product, let's move on to the next slide, is a CSO cybersecurity toolkit. This is a toolkit that just supported CSOs to better understand their civic rights, that helped them to improve their capacity to assess current and potential risks related to digital threats and minimize those risks to remain safe online. It also provided methodologies for addressing mis and disinformation, propaganda, hate speeches, all of these negative aspects of our digital space, as well as tools to address digital surveillance and harassment. And all of the context that we included in the toolkit was Nepal specific, with references and ideas and context that related directly to the cases in Nepal and the potential digital security challenges CSOs might face within our country. And the toolkit addressed issues, very minor issues, like how to protect their online accounts, like how to use multi-factor authentication in passwords, to a much larger intervention, like how to navigate all of the new bills that the government is proposing to limit the civic space. We had to move in, we had to address all of these issues from a very fundamental level to a more challenging level, because what we found while we were discussing with CSOs was that these CSOs, a lot of the CSOs lack the basic knowledge to make them safe from all of these digital threats that we can find, especially in Nepal as well. I myself am from a technical background, so it was quite surprising for me that the survey that we conducted, over 60% of the CSOs didn't use two-factor authentication, and that was the bare minimum that we thought that all of the organizations would be implementing. And when we found that out, we had to change all of the aspects of our project as well, of the topics that we wanted to cover. So let's move on to the next slide, and we can talk more about that. So the biggest challenge that we found was to navigate the suppressive bills that the government proposed, like the ITV bills, the public service broadcasting bills. There was the advertisement regulation bill and Nepal Media Council bill as well. All of these bills were kind of directed towards suppressing basic rights to the citizens. The IT bill, for example, would require all social networking companies operating within the country to register within the Department of Information and Technology. So additionally, the bill would ban any content on social media deemed to have a detrimental effect on Nepal's national unity. That's the word that they use, national unity, and the term has not been clearly defined at all. So it leaves the door open for misuse by government and misuse by the government, basically. And so it's quite challenging for us, because if this bill gets passed, thankfully it hasn't yet, it was proposed in 2019, but if this bill does get passed, then we need to rethink how we change all of the content within our toolkit as well. So it was quite challenging for us at the time to navigate through this proposed bill. And our biggest learning is that the CSOs deem these kinds of products very useful. As I mentioned before, a lot of these CSOs don't really have the basic knowledge or skills or tools to protect themselves. They are constantly misplacing their documents. Their data is constantly getting deleted or lost. They don't really have backups. So, and it's really difficult for them to navigate through the government's laws as well. It's quite difficult for the CSOs to basically hold the government accountable. And I think it's really important for us to equip these CSOs, equip these reformers in our communities, to empower them, to give them skills, the knowledge, and the tools to better protect themselves from the laws and from the digital and online threats, and to give them the power to help make Nepal a more democratic country, actually. And that's all of our presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be really happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beacon. I'm really glad that you were able to present, that you were able to work on this project, but also present this project, since I think that this is a universal issue for many CSOs all over the world. So I'm hoping that, you know, a lot of the participants will be able to learn from your experience and from your project. And I'm sure I'll turn to the CIPE team and correct me if I'm wrong, but if there is any collaboration that can come out of this event, I'm sure we can put people in touch as well. So I'm going to turn to some questions, and maybe I'll start with just a question to everyone, which is just what has been one of the biggest challenges you faced in implementing and carrying out? And I think that a lot of you touched on this, so I'll also add, like, what is I'll take from one of the previous questions, what is one of the most surprising things that you've learned from these projects? And that can be an open question for everyone. Irina?
Yeah, I can start. For me, the most surprising were two things. First thing was more about our organization, that all of our members decided to stay inside of the country and to work here, not to run away. And the other thing was that the war finally, like all the political parties, all different people who never talked to each other before and who had a lot of conflicts, they were able to unite and to work together to protect Ukraine. It was an amazing experience. It's super bad that we gained it in such a way, but I guess a lot of new connections and a lot of new partnership will appear from this time that we're in.
Thank you. Beacon, I saw your hand next.
Thanks. So one of the biggest surprise that we had during the project, and it was a positive surprise as well, is that how many organizations actually volunteered to come and be a part of our project. Usually with all of these kinds of workshops and dialogues, it's quite difficult to find the right participants, but we had an overwhelming amount of CSOs who wanted to be a part of this, who wanted to learn about this, wanted to contribute towards this. And the best part is, well, our partnering organization is till date working on the toolkit, and a lot of organizations are still a part of this toolkit as well. They conduct these dialogues regularly. We have kind of like a fortnightly dialogues, discussion points on how we can improve this toolkit further as well. And that was a really beautiful surprise, I'd say.
Finally, Ruslan.
For me, the biggest challenge that we faced was, of course, it was a total network shutdown and the further restriction of some websites. And the second challenge is that after the generic massacre, the government was changed, and we were forced to communicate with just recently the newly appointed government officials. So we had some good GR relations with the former representatives of the personal data protection body here, and then we were forced to change the people to communicate with the other officials. So that's it.
Let's turn to the next question. So what did you see at the local level that informs how technology could play a role in future democracy strengthening projects?
I can start. So when we were working on the project, the digitalization that happened during the healthcare reform that were granted previously helped us a lot, because we had a lot of open dashboards with statistical information. So we didn't need, to write letters to different organizations, to different hospitals and things like that, because everything was available online. And it helped us to conduct the project we have in much faster than we anticipated before.
Great, thank you. Ruslan or Beacon, do you want to take the next answer?
Actually, I'm ready to answer the third question. So,
Okay. Beacon, if you have no comments on this, I can turn to the third question for everyone.
Could you repeat the question again? Because I didn't really get it.
So what did you see at the local level that informs how technology could play a role in future democracy strengthening projects?
Oh, okay. So, well, since our project was strengthening CSOs, a big part of our work was working with local CSOs as well. And we sadly we couldn't visit the local level physically because of travel restrictions in Nepal due to COVID, but we did have a lot of online engagements. And what we saw was that local CSOs actually have a much larger need for digital safety and security and technology needs than central level CSOs. I mean, the central level CSOs don't really work as much as the local level CSOs at the grassroots level, right? So the local CSOs who actually work at the grassroots levels have so many stories, so many experiences, so many information that could be used at by the local level governments, the provincial level, the federal level governments to make policies to change laws and regulations. And all of these informations are just laid wasted at the local level CSOs. And with tech-driven, with the technology at the local level, with local CSOs, these information could actually shape a lot of these dialogues at the central level, at the provincial level, and help make better policies for the citizens as well. That's what I say.
Thank you for that. And so we have a final question, and I will turn to Ruslan first. I know we're running a little short on time, so I want to be mindful of that. So what do local democracy reformers need in terms of support or technical assistance in order to be more effective moving forward?
By the way, Bikin, I really inspired by your project because it's very closely interconnected with what I'm doing, also data protection. So thank you for the information, for sharing your achievements, and good luck, of course, for your further activity. So answering the third questions, as you might know, during the project, we have been officially included to the working group under the parliament of the Kazakhstan, and we proposed some amendments and related to the data consent. So we recommend to create some provisions that any any operator of any person or legal person who processing personal data have to somehow automatize this process. So and we have very nice examples of data consent management platforms, and we will try to implement all these practices here in Kazakhstan. And by the way, civil society actors, any NGOs, are also processing personal data of the clients, and they do it, just by paper, by using without any technology. So it's very important to realize this idea about the data consent management platform, not only for the government, for the officials, but also for civil society actors, for NGOs. So it's very important for us to be more effective in the digital age. That's it.
Thank you. And I think we have a minute left, so I do want to maybe should we just turn to closing statements? And Arina and Beacon, if you have final comments, you can write them in the Q&A or write them in the chat, and we can make them public for everyone. Does that work? Okay. So Adam, maybe I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Sasha, and thank you to everyone who presented here today. I mean, we definitely have some fantastic presentations, a lot more to discuss, and I hope these discussions will continue moving forward. Again, thank you very much to everybody for coming here today. I do also want to flag that if you enjoyed today's event, CIPE definitely has a number of other events coming up on the horizon, one of which will be tomorrow as CIPE presents the results of a major regional anti-corruption and transparency survey of over 2,000 entrepreneurs from Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. And then later in September, on September 27th and 28th, CIPE will be having its second annual FEDEN conference, the Free Enterprise and Democracy Network. This is a virtual 2-day conference, which will convene leaders and advocates from around the globe under the theme of rallying for freedom from ideals to engagement. Key features include keynote address from Damon Wilson, workshops on anti-corruption, preparing for change and collective action, and then of course, opportunities to network with FEDEN members. I do know we are at time, so I definitely want to be respectful of that. Thank you very much for joining us today, and please feel free to reach out for any follow-ups, and I look forward to more conversations. So thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you,
Thanks
Sasha.
so much.
Thank you, Adam. Stay safe.